The Last Selfie, Shadows of the Asylum. The Last Selfie, Part 3. The clock's ticking intensified with each passing second, drowning out everything else. Emma, Riley, and Tyler stood frozen, the shadows creeping closer, as if the very walls of the asylum were alive, pressing in on them. The figure, the pale face, was no longer just in the photo. It was real. It was here. "Run!" Emma shouted, her voice trembling. Without thinking, they bolted through the hallways, the sound of their footsteps echoing against the hollow walls. But the asylum didn't seem to have any exits. The doors they had passed through earlier had vanished. The once familiar rooms twisted into unfamiliar corridors, hallways that stretched and bent in impossible ways. The asylum was shifting, and with every turn, it seemed to get darker. The clock's ticking followed them, growing louder, until it was the only sound they could hear. "We're not going to make it out of here!" Tyler yelled, his voice filled with panic. His eyes were wide, his face pale, and his breath came in short, ragged gasps. "We can't!" Emma started, but a sudden cold gust of air knocked her off balance. She stumbled backward and found herself facing a door she hadn't seen before. It was old, weathered, its brass handle covered in strange symbols. She reached out to open it, her heart racing. The moment the door creaked open, a blast of frigid air hit them, and Emma's breath formed a cloud of mist in front of her. The room was vast, stretching far beyond what the asylum's architecture should have allowed. The walls seemed to stretch into infinity, adorned with strange symbols and old paintings that seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at them. And there, in the center of the room, stood the figure. Jason? But it wasn't Jason as they remembered him. His eyes were wide and hollow, his skin a sickly shade of gray, as if the life had been drained from him. His mouth hung open in a silent scream, but no sound came out. He reached out to them, his fingers long and twisted, but his movements were slow, almost mechanical, as if he was trapped in some kind of loop. "No, Jason!" Emma cried, rushing toward him. But before she could reach him, the ground beneath them rumbled. A low, guttural growl seemed to emanate from the very walls of the room. The clock's ticking reached a fever pitch, each tick sending a shock through the air. "You're too late," a voice echoed around them, deep and ancient. It wasn't Jason's voice. It was something else, something older, more malevolent. The figure that had once been Jason slowly began to change, its shape warping as if reality itself couldn't hold it together. The edges of its form flickered in and out of existence, like an illusion being torn apart. "Get out of here!" Riley screamed. "We need to leave now!" But the door they had come through was gone. The room had sealed shut, and the walls seemed to press in around them, narrowing with every breath they took. The ticking, the clock, the pale face from the selfie. All of it was coming together, revealing the truth that they had been too afraid to acknowledge. "This place," Emma gasped. "It's not just haunted, it's a prison, for souls, lost in time." The walls around them seemed to pulse, as if the very heart of the asylum was alive, feeding on their fear, pulling them deeper into its grip. Tyler backed away from the figure that was once Jason. "We can't escape," he whispered, his eyes wide with terror. It's been waiting for us." Emma glanced around, searching for a way out. The walls were covered in symbols that she could barely make sense of, and in the center of the room, the clock's hands, though broken and missing, were still moving, backward. Each backward tick erased another moment, another fragment of reality. Then, she saw it. On the far side of the room, hidden beneath layers of dust and decay, was another door, a narrow passageway that led deep into the heart of the asylum. It wasn't much, but it was something. "We have to go," Emma shouted. They ran toward the door, but as they did, the figure of Jason, or whatever it had become, reached out and grabbed Riley by the arm. Her scream echoed in the vast room, but it was cut off as she was pulled back, disappearing into the shadows. "No! Riley!" Tyler screamed, but it was too late. The figure released its grip, and Riley was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate. Emma and Tyler stood frozen in horror. Riley was gone. The asylum had taken her, just like it had taken Jason. We can't leave her," Emma said, shaking her head, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to!" Tyler shouted. "We're next! If we don't leave now, we're all going to end up like Jason." But Emma didn't listen. She couldn't. Riley was her friend. They had to find a way to save her. She rushed to the other side of the room, where she had seen the strange symbols carved into the walls. As she touched one of them, the air around her crackled with energy. "You can't escape time!" The voice echoed again, this time closer. Time never forgets. The clock's ticking stopped. Emma froze, her heart pounding. The voice came from everywhere now. The asylum, the curse, everything. It was all connected to the clock. "The past is alive," the voice continued, "and the past always comes back to claim what it lost." Suddenly, the room started to crumble. The floor cracked open beneath them, and the walls split apart. The ground shook violently, and Emma could feel the very fabric of reality tearing apart around her. In the distance, she heard Riley's voice, soft, distant, pleading. "Emma, help me." Emma turned toward the door, now fully opened, beckoning her to escape. But something in her chest pulled her back. She had no choice. She had to face what the asylum had become, what it had always been, a place that consumed souls and trapped them in its endless loop. Riley, Jason, would she be next? The clock's tick resumed, and with it, a new terror. Time was running out.